Every single day.
People want to connect with someone who...
Self-expression is life.
It is the challenge. It's a challenge of life. You can't get mad at other people for not seeing your vision.
It was all about a grind. Like I said, I was selling CDs, DVDs, and clothes out the trunk of my car.
Whatever it takes.
This is for the people. Don't forget that.
Pasta, I love pasta, it's a wonderful food. Rigatoni, mustacholi, and spaghetti too. Pasta, I love pasta, take a look and you'll see. Fettuccine, vermicelli, ravioli for me.
What's up, Lug Life family? Zach here, episode 21. I'm with Joe Bruno, Pasta Nostra on 20 South Main Street in South Norwalk. Thank you so much for having us, Joe. Do you mind just telling everyone, who you are, where you're from, and how you got into the restaurant industry?
Oh, that's easy. I'm Joe Bruno. They call me Chef Joe around here, and I'm from Brooklyn. And I like to say in Italian slang, io sono brooklino, which means I'm a guy from Brooklyn.
I love that.
And yeah, it's a sort of a made-up word. I have a lot of friends in Italy, and people would say, well, where are you from? And if you say Brooklyn, everybody knows Brooklyn in Italy. There's even a gum called Brooklyn gum. Did you know that?
No.
And there's a bridge on it. And so everybody knows Brooklyn because everybody has a cousin or knows somebody with a cousin in Brooklyn.
Yep.
Brooklyn is one of the biggest repositories for the diaspora. When people got off the boat, they came to Brooklyn.
Of course.
So then one day I just said, io sono brooklino, and people started laughing because there was no such thing as a brooklino, because there's no such thing as Brooklyn in Italy.
Right. It's slang, basically.
Yeah, it's slang, coined Italian, and it seemed funny. So when I opened this place, this second restaurant of mine, I used it as the name. Whether it was a good idea or a bad idea to drop my original name is up, everyone has an opinion about
Sure.
that. But I, as a creative chef, I wanted to have a different name.
Of course.
Because I wanted to do stuff that I never did in the other place.
You wanted a new identity.
Right. I wanted to expand my identity. Right.
Yep.
And it was difficult, and some people just couldn't get over the fact that I changed the name, but I did. So I'm from Brooklyn, Carroll Gardens. To people from Carroll Gardens.
Represent.
Court Street. I grew up right near a restaurant that everybody loves in Brooklyn now, Frankie's Spuntino.
Yep.
A block away, but it wasn't Frankie's Spuntino then. It was a dry cleaning store and something else. Oh, and it was a tin roofing company on one side and a dry cleaning store on the other. And then what was the other part of the question?
So then you moved to Connecticut.
How I got to Connecticut?
Yep.
So I had left Brooklyn. I'd gone to California. I'd learned a lot about stone masonry, rubble masonry, adobe masonry. I built fireplaces. I worked on construction out there. Then I came back to the States. To New York State.
Yep.
And we bought a piece of land, my wife and I, upstate New York. 150 acres, retired dairy farm. We had a horse, pigs, huge garden. I'm not going to tell you what we grew in the garden. It was all illegal then. But we had a huge garden. We had a lot of fun. We raised our babies there. One of them was actually born in the farmhouse.
Really?
Yes, and it was such a unique thing, which is so strange because people were always born in farmhouses. But by the time my second son in 1975 was born in our farmhouse, the town clerk didn't even know how to write a birth certificate because it had been 3 town clerks back or 4 town clerks back before the last birth certificate had been written. So he didn't know what to do. And he was very, flummoxed by the whole thing. Like, I don't do this anymore. Because everyone was born in the hospital, which was 2 towns over in Oneida. And we were in Camden, New York.
Okay, yeah.
So way upstate in the boonies, in the Tug Hill Plateau, the place where you shouldn't go. I didn't know that then. Anyway, we were there for quite a while. And then something happened in my family, and I came back to New York, and I helped my father with his business on Court Street. And
what kind of business did he have?
He had a food business. We had a meat market.
Oh, wow.
So all my brothers and I, all 3 of us, learned how to cut meat, how to break an animal down, how to make sausages, how to make hams, and all the things you had to know to be a butcher. So we all did that, and I was the last to come to the butchering. I was more involved in running the market, but I eventually decided that in the event that my father retired and my brother and I should take it over,
Yeah.
I should know everything just like
Of course.
my father and his brother did, and my other brothers knew. That did not happen. But in the meantime, I bought a building in Park Slope to live in, a four-family apartment house,
Wow.
limestone, beautiful building. And when it became clear that my brother and I were not going to take the business, my father was going to sell it, and we found a buyer. And I started to look at this building, and I thought, well, this could be in New York, you called it a co-op.
Yep.
There were co-ops and there were condos, but it was early in the world of condos and co-ops, and,
Yep.
and the New York structure was very good for co-ops, and they're legally different entities. And I looked into it, and I thought, if I made a co-op, I could sell 4 apartments, and I could probably double my money.
Now you could probably 10x. Right.
Yeah, but I looked at it, and my neighbor, who was a young attorney, he had bought a building next to me. He had the same idea, and he said, we could do this. It's not that hard to do. They make it look like it's difficult, but it's really simple. So we went ahead and did all the legal work, and I decided to restore my building.
Wow.
So I'm a builder. So I was always being a builder. So I restored the fireplaces and the woodwork, and little by little I restored all these apartments over
incredible.
the course of year and a half, 2 years. And my wife, after the supermarket was gone, my father's store, my wife went to work as the assistant to the president of Steuben Glass on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. So a very posh job in a posh location for a very posh lady. So,
Yeah.
so she had something to do, and she brought in the spending money and the bacon money while I stayed home and renovated the building.
Yep.
And actually also did some homeschooling for my kids.
Wow.
At the same time, which was pretty interesting. Because we had a fight with New York about it. I had to actually hire a lawyer, and
Wow.
my son had to have a lawyer, and we had to. Yeah, it was tough, but we won.
There we go.
We won because they looked at my work, and one of the educators said to me during the examination, "How do you get this kid to read all this stuff?"
That's amazing.
Because he doesn't want to stop.
Well, then you did a good job.
Curious, he
Yeah.
wants to know. Anyway. The co-op, the condo thing turned into, it was a co-op, turned into like not double my money, it was like 10 times my money.
Wow.
Maybe more. And we had one apartment left, and we lived in it. And my wife said, we had friends who had gone to Italy a lot. We had friends from Italy, but I'd never been. And my cousins had never been, my aunts and uncles. Nobody had gone back since my
Wow.
grandparents came. That's, going on. Well, then it was going on 80 years, 90 years.
That's incredible.
Because some of them came in the late 1800s, some of them came in the early 19s. And I said, well, that's a great idea. You don't mind? No, let's just go. We have all this money. Let's just go. Like
Go for a trip.
a few months, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we booked a steamer that would leave Montreal, go up the Hudson, the St. Lawrence River, up through the St. Lawrence Seaway, out past Newfoundland, out past Greenland, and land in London.
Wow.
And we got off in London, and we took a ferry to Gothenburg in Sweden, where we had purchased a Saab on the foreign exchange program, which was so cheap because the dollar was so strong against the Swedish krona, which I think is still the currency there.
Yeah.
And they delivered us our beautiful Saab for like $12,000. It
Wow.
was a $18,000 car in New York City. It was a $20,000 to $30,000 car in various countries in Europe, depending on which country and which the tax structure was, how the tax structure was set up. That was before the EU and the Economic Union.
Yeah.
And we had this beautiful car. We picked it up in Sweden, and we drove it all the way to Sicily.
That's
so
amazing.
it was a 6-month junket. And they included in that shipping home.
Wow.
And it was running on leaded gas in Europe, but the catalytic converter was stuck in a box somewhere in the trunk. And so we did this gigantic 6-month Giro. We went all around, mostly Italy.
Sounds
France,
amazing.
of course, Denmark, Germany. We had to get there. And then we had to go back. We drove it back to London and gave it to them, and they put it on a ship. And we got on the same ship, which was the last sailing of the Stefan Batory, which was that steamer I talked about.
Yeah.
It was the Polish Line's only Polish ship, and it was the last few weeks before the Russians invaded.
Wow.
And shut down that democratic movement that was called Solidarity in Poland, so 1981. And most of the people on the return trip were people who were leaving Poland because they couldn't. If they'd stayed, they'd have been in the Gulag somewhere.
Yeah. So it's fine. During this journey, this 6-month journey, did you learn a ton about the culinary world? Like, when you were traveling, were you learning all about?
Well, we learned not to count on any fancy food in a Polish ship. But it wasn't bad, actually. It was pretty good. But what happened there is when we got to Italy, well, first of all, we were in Italy, and we were tasting the food that my ancestors had made. I had an aunt from Genoa, so very far in the north. So we come in through the north, and we're up in Liguria and Piedmont, and we're eating these amazing things, and we're seeing what we do and what we have been doing for generations in Brooklyn, and in other parts of the country. But me personally, my family in Brooklyn, and we're seeing this this parallel, this corroboration, between because we didn't. When you leave a country and you're poor and you don't even have written language, you have your spoken language, which was sort of Italian, but most of them were not speaking Italian.
Right.
They were speaking some patois of dialects that were local, and what we preserved, what we held on to, was our food, and for good reason. I mean, I guess if it wasn't very good food, we'd have tossed it.
Of course.
But it was really good food. So why would you throw that out, right?
It's amazing.
So and it was cool to see what people were eating there and what we were doing, but the array was much greater. And we visited Milan, and we were enthralled with the beauty of the city and the food of the city. And we went to the Galleria, which was that glass-covered, and it still is, that glass-covered, like the first mall in the world. Maybe Naples was the first mall in the world, I'm not sure. But they're very similar. And we went into the Galleria, and the stores are in the thing about the Galleria, if you've never been, it's an open air. It's open on the ends, but it's all covered in glass. And the buildings are actually covered in glass. They're not just stores or kiosks in a mall. They're actually separate buildings, discrete buildings and so there's a great street. And the street is where everyone sort of gathers in the Galleria, and artists might perform spontaneously. And you can see in the windows. And one store had the pasta machine, and the pasta machine was turning out little tortellini.
Wow.
And it was going around and around. I'd never seen anything like it. And it was actually a pasta store. And we stood there and we looked at it, and we were just mesmerized. And the little tortellini was spitting out 2 by 2, like, and they're going down this little chute into a tray, and then the woman would come and smile at us and take them away and bring another tray. And so, oh my God, this is amazing. And my wife and I, we looked at it and said, maybe we could get one of these machines and do this. Cool. This is so beautiful. And she was a terrible cook when I met her. She was an amazing cook by that time. Yeah. Because she took to it. She had an American, sort of blue-blooded American background and a can opener. And she knew how to make dinner with the can opener. It was great. But when she got into, when she came into my family and she learned to cook, she could whip up pasta without a recipe. She'd just say, how many people are going to be? Get the flour, put it on the board, put the eggs out, and it's 1 egg per person. And she'd roll it out. It's amazing. No time at all, we'd be eating homemade noodles that were just silky and sublime. So she was great at that, and she had this passion for it by then. And she had spent time after Steuben and before Steuben working in my dad's store, learning about all the foods that we did. So she has had that background too. Excuse me. So so there was that connection. So we kind of let that go. We traveled south. We went. Finally, we got to my grandfather's town, which is in the middle of the country, on the East Coast. A beautiful. It looks like the Laguna Beach of Italy. Wow. It's got cliffs. And the houses are up in the cliff, and palm trees. I didn't realize palm trees could grow that far north, but it's the Mediterranean climate. It's so different. What's the name of the town? Ortona Mare, or some people just say Ortona. It's near Pescara, so it's if you were in Rome and you drove straight across, a lot of on the Latitude, is that it?
Yeah.
North, south, east, west. I mean, you just drive straight across and you sort of drive right into it.
Awesome.
And we were camping sometimes, and we were staying in hotels and pensiones other times to save money. And we didn't always have a fancy hotel. And so there was a camping ground right outside of town, and we had heard about it, and we pulled in there. We started setting up our camp, and I had my 2 kids were like 6 and 8 at the time. And my wife said, look, I'm going to go into town. It's about 3 more miles away, and get some dinner so we don't have to do that, and then we'll bring some stuff back and we'll cook at the camp. She goes into town, and right in the middle of the only street is this pastificio. This pasta al uovo, which means egg pasta, which typically is synonymous with fresh pasta, because you put eggs in fresh pasta, you put just water in dry pasta, like noodles, like ziti and penne. Those are just flour and water, typically. And she comes back and she says, oh, I just went to this pasta store. It's beautiful. And I met the guy, and I told him that your grandfather came from this town, and he's all excited and he wants to meet you tomorrow. And then we ate the pasta, and it was really good. And so the next day I went to see the guy and looked at the town. And I thought, how could my grandfather, I was actually like touching the walls in these little narrow streets. Yeah. That's you can only go in with a Vespa, but of course in those days they had horses when they went through the street, so they went on foot. Wow. And I thought my grandfather was actually here. He was here. He was 22 when he left. He knew these places. He hung out in these places. He might have kissed a girl in that little hallway over there. What an amazing thing to be touching my past like that. And I went to see the guy at the pasta store, and I was so moved by the whole thing. And he was a wonderful guy, and little tiny store, and they were making the pasta, and he showed me how they were doing it, and he was really happy to meet me. And I said to him, I said, hey, and he was about like late 50s, 60. I said, maybe you could just sell me this store, and I'll stay here with my kids. My kids grew up to be Italian, and I'll be great. And he was taken by surprise. He
wasn't expecting that.
He said, well, that's really nice. He said, but, I don't think I'm
ready to sell. I'm
not ready, not ready to be a pensionato, which is retired and on a pension, And I said, okay, but so where do you get these machines then? And he said, look, I'll tell you where you get the machines. I'll send you to the place.
Wow.
But you got to promise me one thing.
You won't put them out of business.
Yeah, you won't put them in this town.
It's a small town.
And I said, no, listen. I didn't come here to come to this town, but when I saw this, I wanted to have it. But if I can't have it, then I'm going to take them back and have it in Brooklyn.
It's amazing.
So that's what so that was the plan, to go and do it in Brooklyn.
So you brought back these machines with you?
So at the end of the 6 months, toward the end of the 6 months, we went to Milan. We went all around the North Country there where they make all these different manufacturers, and we went from one to the other. We started meeting others. I spent time in pasta machines in Milan, in pasta stores in Milan, where they very generously opened their doors and brought me in and showed me how to make it, gave me recipes, show me how the machine, those people I don't even know, just kindly sharing all of this.
This was basically your apprenticeship, and you didn't even know at the time.
Right, and I made a decision on which I took home sort of 2 agreements with 2 different companies, and there was one that was absolutely beautiful, all chrome and really old tech, all cast iron, no cabinet work. You know what I mean? Like sheet metal work. Yeah. Just a basic cast iron machine with gigantic gears and chrome arms moving and things turning, like a pinball machine. Yeah. But making pasta and making different kinds of pasta. And I was fascinated by that. And then there was this other more modern machine company that everything was in a cabinet and everything was concealed. And there wasn't so much chrome, but there was some stainless steel instead. And I was torn, so I took 2 agreements back with 2 lists of stuff I would buy. And I went to see some people in New York. And I went to see a guy who had one of those big chrome machines with the cast iron, and he was spitting curses. He's a well-known guy in New York. He opened up a company called Tutta Pasta, I think, down on Sullivan or Carmine.
Okay.
I think he's gone by now, but he personally may be gone, but I think the place is still there. And he was so angry because he had bought this machine, and
Didn't work.
Right. It was made old tech all the way, and you had to really know how to finesse it. Like when you change parts, they weren't interchangeable. The idea of interchangeability of parts hadn't quite caught up with. There's a lot of machine shops all in the area of northern Italy, like there are in Brooklyn.
Yep.
And a lot of great machinists. In fact, some of the best German machining is often done in northern Italy because these people really know their game. And the guy who produced the machine, I didn't understand this at first, and I could understand it once he showed me. He didn't really know how to, like, take a part off one machine and put it on the other. You had to use shims and stuff, and you had to get it just right, otherwise it didn't work. So, oh man, that might not work out. Even though they were beautiful. I mean, they were so beautiful. It's like looking at a Ferrari. Yeah. Everything was perfect looking. Yeah. And then I went to people who used the other machine, and what became Contadina Fresh, which finally became Vitoni, but it wasn't even Contadina Fresh then. We had an in with those people, and it was still a small company. They talked to me about their machines, which was the ones in the cabinets they were more ordinary looking. They looked like Xerox copiers, but they were safe. So that's the one we went with.
That's amazing.
And then we ordered the machines. I guess we put the order in by then. It's sometime in '82, and it takes about a year to make them and everything.
Wow.
Nothing is off the shelf. It's not like you're buying a Maytag washer.
Yep.
They're going to make the machine for you, and they're going to make it. You're going to modify certain specs to do the things you want to do.
Sure.
And we didn't really know what the hell we were doing, so we were creating specs like based on what we were doing by hand.
Yeah.
And that was a problem because they kept saying, well, the machine, it's not a hand, it's not going to do everything like that. And we said, well, we expect you to get it as close as possible.
Yeah.
So we pushed them to get, we wanted the pasta to be extremely thin, as you would do with a rolling pin. And we wanted the fillings to be all natural with most fillings that run through machines have to have some kind of stabilizer to keep them from being too sticky. Otherwise, they won't. The machine pushes the filling into the dough and then
comes back.
It retracts,
Yep.
and the filling's got to stay there. And that's tricky to do with a filling that's sticky or wet, and especially if the dough is very thin. So we pushed them on all that, and we drove them crazy. And the machines took about a year and a half to come. And meanwhile, at that time, a group of guys in Long Island City were actually forming an American version, American subsidiary of that company, which was great. And they didn't have any floor models, and they didn't have any money for floor models. So they said, well, your machines are arriving, so since you're not ready for them, we'll take a receipt of them and put them in our storeroom. And then they said, do you mind if we open the crates and let people see them? We won't run them, but let people see them because we have no floor models. I said, okay, in return for storage until I'm ready for them, you won't run them and you'll let people see them. I'm okay with that. So I got free storage for almost a year because we weren't ready, because the Brooklyn idea never worked out. So I started, for various reasons, we didn't do Brooklyn. So we started looking in Lower Manhattan, and actually we looked right on the side of the World Trade Center.
Wow.
Which was a divine providence that we didn't get that space,
of
but we almost got it.
Wow.
So we went through a bunch of neighborhoods. We went to Chelsea, we went to Tribeca, which is where I had been, actually we went to Soho, which I had been involved in real estate in Soho long before all this, when I was 21 years old. And it wasn't called Soho. And I couldn't make a nickel. I lost everything because it wasn't ready.
Right.
So we went to Soho, but by then Soho was rich man's land. We couldn't afford anything in Soho. We couldn't afford Chelsea, and nothing worked out. And then I looked in the Hamptons, which is where my parents had retired to, and I found a couple of things in the Hamptons, and those deals fell through for one reason or another.
Wow.
And then I came up here.
Just started moving north.
Well, my sister was going out with a guy whose father owned a bunch of land in Portchester. So I went to Portchester and I looked at his property, and I looked at Portchester and I thought to myself, why is this town, one of the most beautiful little towns along this strip, why is this town dead?
Yeah.
Why did it die, and why doesn't it come back to life? And then I started meeting some of the real estate guy who my sister's My sister was going out with his son. And I started to realize why, because they had bad ideas about development, and they were greedy. And you can't be begging people to come to your town and be greedy at the same time. Yep. You can't be like whacking them over the head to get their money before they made any money. You got to give them a shot.
Yep.
And then they give you a shot, and then your value goes up. But they weren't thinking that way, and I finally abandoned Greenwich. I was like, abandoned Portchester. I was like, you people are crazy. So I went to Greenwich, and I found an awesome store right next to the Bonton Fish Market. We were talking about the fish market.
Yeah.
And the fish we get. And that deal didn't work out. Deals are hard to make, especially when you're doing a store, because there's all problems with stores, smells and exhausts.
Yeah.
You have to put flues. That didn't work out. And then I started searching all over Connecticut, Fairfield County, and I saw Darien, I saw New Canaan, I saw Westport, and I had objections to everything. And finally, this real estate lady, she said, there's a place I could show you, but it's really a long shot, and I don't know if you'd want to see it. I said, well, listen, I've seen everything else, and I don't like it. I did in little towns like New Canaan that were sort of at the end of a road.
Yeah.
Because you would only be doing business in New Canaan.
Yeah.
And every town had its sort of political, social, cultural flavor. And I didn't like that. I liked Greenwich because it was more cosmopolitan, but I couldn't find anything in Greenwich that I could afford. So she shows me this, and she drives me down Washington Street, and we're in the middle of the block, and I say, stop the car. That's my spot.
Wow.
And there was nothing there. Everything had been condemned, and everything was being rebuilt. Some of the buildings had no roofs. Some of them had no windows. Some of them had no plumbing yet.
Wow.
But I found my spot.
So this is 1984.
Early 84. She takes me to the real estate office, and I said, I want the spot. They show me the spot. They tell me the deal. The developer is offering some, I wasn't expecting any help. The developer is offering assistance. There's also some favorable loans to be had from the state, because this is called an enterprise zone. Or it was then, whatever. And so if you were going to invest in here, you would get a deal on money, and you get this rebate from the landlord who would help you with building it out. And there were a number of perks. There was also a tax reductionary time when you could have a reduced real estate tax, which was very favorable. So all of that went in, but I didn't care about that. I liked the space. It was my space. It was the thing I had been drawing for every space I saw in Brooklyn and Manhattan and Greenwich, and never got. So, and this was the space. It was pre-made for my drawings. So I went right in and rented it, and took it. We opened Pasta Nostra. We got our machines from the company.
It's incredible.
So does that answer? Is that the short answer to your question?
That definitely explains what a lot of what they call the cult feels about your food, right? It's the attention to detail, that it has to be perfection for you. Starting a restaurant in the 80s is very different than right now. We talked about how...
I don't know how people start them now.
What?
I don't know how they do it now.
I think it's probably going to be a lost craft, right? Because now corporations start restaurants, these huge conglomerates, versus someone like yourself who's just starting one store who's super passionate about pasta. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, but I think you're talking about the commodification of everything.
Right.
Everything in our world has been subsumed by this idea that it can be turned into a major business.
Right.
Look at taxis.
Right.
Now it's Uber, which is
right.
an international corporation, right? And people are burning up their own cars and ruining them to make a few bucks, driving us around. Whereas a taxi driver used to own your taxi, own your medallion in most cities, and you...
that was your business.
Yeah, that was your business, that was your life. And you put your kids through college on it. I don't think anyone's going to college on daddy's Uber pay.
No.
So, because it's not Uber pay at all.
Yeah.
It's what's the opposite of Uber in German? I don't know, but that's what it is. It's Uber for the shareholders, but not for the rest of us.
Yeah. So when you and I were talking, you said one huge game changer for you is when you were in the New York Times. That basically changed from you being a small store to people standing in line.
We built that restaurant, and that street was empty.
Wow.
And my brother and I built it. My brother was a junior partner. And my brother, we were almost ready. It was winter was coming on, like November, and we're almost ready to open. And my brother took me outside and he said, "But look, Joe, there's nobody here."
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Well, how do you know this is going to work?" And I said, "Well, I don't."
Of course.
But
isn't that entrepreneurship right there?
I think it will.
Yeah.
Because look at this beautiful street. First of all, this whole street has to work. And look at this beautiful neighborhood, and look at where a block from the water. I mean, this is waterfront property. This is a waterfront town.
Yeah.
You know, this has got to work. And there's a lot of energy, a lot of people coming in, building little stores and stuff, and that will help. I said, we don't have to make a lot. You know, if we make a few $100s a week, we pay our rent,
yeah,
we'll be happy.
Yeah.
So the very important thing there is that the bottom line is very low. Because all you need is a certain amount.
Yep.
And if you know that you only need a certain little amount, you're really on easy street, because then everything you build on top of that is gravy,
yep,
it's profit,
yep,
or it's reinvestment, and you can survive, because you need to be able to survive. And I knew we could survive because I had set aside a certain amount of money that I wouldn't let us use for the build out. And we also took advantage of the loan from the state, the low interest loan, which we didn't need.
Wow.
But we had it, so it was there in the bank. And I also didn't buy a house, I rented a house. So I didn't put any money into real estate. It was all in the business. So we had a big cushion.
It's amazing.
And that was a very good idea, because I had almost lost, when we were upstate in New York, I almost lost the farm. Yeah. Because Arab oil embargo came along and wrecked me, and I had no cushion, I had no money, I had no reserve. So your question was
about the New York Times, you know.
Yeah, so the Times comes, right. So I opened in December, and it's quiet, but people are coming in, they're curious.
Of course.
And then all of a sudden people start coming back, and one day, mid-January, late January, this tall woman who was from New Canaan, she was an artist, dead now, Wilma Irvin, though, very interesting, remarkable lady, always wore black hair down to here, black dresses, black coats, black sweaters, black jewelry,
wow,
black boots. She was the lady in black. And she was a remarkably good artist. She went to school with Andy Warhol, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was very talented, an amazing photographer. And we actually had, I think, a show of her work, maybe more than one, at the restaurant. She came into the kitchen one day, and she'd been in a lot. I'd see her coming in and going. And she said, "You know, this is really good food. We don't have anything like this around here." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. I've noticed you coming and going and talking to my wife and my sister, so I guess you like it. Thank you." And she said, "You know, you're going to be in the New York Times." And I'm not from a restaurant background. We had a meat market, supermarket in Brooklyn. No newspaper ever wrote about us. You know, there was nothing remarkable about it. What was so remarkable about a meat market? You know, I mean, good one, bad one. But there were no reviews, like there was no social media.
Yep.
No one went out and said, "No, I got a terrible steak from that guy. Don't go back there." You know, nothing like that was happening. People didn't talk about stuff like that. They told their neighbors, you know, "Don't go there anymore," or "We had a bad time there," whatever. That was it. And I said, "No, I don't want to be in the New York Times." She said, "Well,
it's too late.
I happen to live next door to the New York Times food critic, and she's been here already." I said, "She has?" So I don't know. She said, "Well, she wouldn't tell you she was here." I said, "Oh." So look, I don't really. So anyway, a week later, the phone rings, and it's the critic from the New York Times. And she introduces herself, and I said, "Look, I don't really want to be in your paper. I don't belong in your paper. You know, it's not a murder. It's not a stock crash. It's not a war. There's nothing interesting. And besides, I'm not even a chef. I'm just a guy from Brooklyn who likes to cook, and I'm sharing what I know with people around here, and they seem to like it. And I don't think you should say anything about it. It's just like, you know, just."
You're probably the first person to ever say this to her.
Really? Well, maybe. But I meant it. Like, I didn't really want to be in the Times. I felt embarrassed. And, you know, other chefs would ask, like, well, maybe they would talk about béarnaise sauce. And I don't even know what the hell that is. You know, I don't know anything about French technique. I didn't study. And, you know, not that you need to know about French technique, but, you know, in the culinary world that we lived in, you had to know about all that stuff. A chef had to, you know. If you didn't know about that, what were you? You know, some fly-by-night, which basically I was. I was a builder, kind of a smart entrepreneur. I made a lot of money in my building projects. I had farmland. I built stoneworker, but I didn't deserve to be called a chef, and I didn't want to be called a chef, and I didn't want that kind of attention. And she said, well, I'm sorry, but, I've been there 3 or 4 times now, and she said, but I can tell you this, whatever I say, it's not going to be unfavorable, because I really enjoyed myself. I said, well, that's not the point, but thank you very much. And I'm okay, but anyway, she asked me a bunch of questions. She asked me what I liked to do. And I told her how much I loved architecture and how much I almost went back to school for architecture when I was building in New York and learning about that kind of human activity, but hadn't done it. But I told her what I liked about architecture and how much I liked the Bauhaus, and how much I admired their work, the Le Corbusier and the Mies van der Rohe and so on. And so the one Sunday morning in February, I think 4th or 5th, 1985, so the guy, a chef down the street, comes in with a copy of the New York Times and slams it down and says, dude, you're famous.
That's
I said, what? And there it starts out, something like, Mies van der Rohe's famous less is more doesn't only apply to architecture. As it turns out, Joe Bruno, chef from blah, 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 knows how to do the same thing with food. A handful of flour, some eggs, a bunch of tomatoes and garlic, and you've got something as great as a skyscraper. And oh my God, that's too much, And to put me and Mies van der Rohe in the same sentence was like, getting a taxi ride with an angel or something. You don't deserve that, right? It was overwhelming, and it was overwhelming because we were not open Sunday. But Monday morning came, we were open 6 days a week then, lunch only. And people were lining in February 5th, cold, sunny day, but cold. People are lining up outside before we unlock the door.
Just to try, because it's one article.
Because this article was so powerful. It was a 2-star review, but the words were like magic. She loved everything. And we only had 40 seats. We had 5 tables for 4 and 10 for 2. And we were like looking at it, and we were going, oh my God. And we didn't make a lot of food yet because we didn't have a lot of business. We were just starting. We didn't have a lot of pasta. We didn't have a lot of anything. But we didn't even have a walk-in box. The big refrigerator that every restaurant has to have. Because we didn't have any money, and I wouldn't allow us to spend the money until I knew we were solid.
Of course.
So we were jamming everything into our refrigerators, and we were shopping for vegetables at Stu Leonard's because we couldn't buy boxes of anything from a wholesaler.
Yeah.
So we'd go to Stu Leonard's every morning and fill up a shopping cart, or 2.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Or 3 until we got we had to get the walk-in box put in. But those people came in, and they descended on. I mean, it was like birds on carrion. They were just rushing in, and they filled all 40 seats, and we couldn't seat them all, and then they had to wait in a line, and some were still outside, and more kept coming, and they watched me cooking because it was even more open kitchen than this, and I was like looking at, oh my God, we didn't even know how to cook that fast. And I just kept saying to this small crew we had, I was like, look, we got to do everything right. We just do what we did, and
can't change it now.
Don't get nervous. Don't get nervous. Don't get scared. Just do what we do. Don't cut corners. Don't rush. Take your time. And we kept going and going and going. And those people would finish, and they would come to the counter. We had a counter in the front where we could take things home, and they started buying everything we had.
It's incredible.
Give us a half a pound of Parmesan cheese. Give us a pound of prosciutto. Give us a cup of olives. Give us 2 pints of sauce. Give us 4 boxes of ravioli. We sold everything we had. There was nothing left. The place was bare. It was like a fire sale. And we had nothing left to open with because a lot of our stuff came from Brooklyn. Of
course.
So we had a van, and my brother got in the van and went to Brooklyn, and we had to get meat. All the meat came from the Hunts Point. Well, now not Hunts Point, Fort Greene Market, which has moved. Now it's in. Now it's all in Hunts Point too.
Everything,
but then it moved to Manhattan. Then it moved anyway. He had to go back to Fort Greene, get more meat, more steaks, we'd get a shoulder of beef to make our ground beef to make meatballs, and we'd get pork butts to make sausages, and we had to restock everything. So we couldn't open Tuesday.
Wow.
And we didn't have any internet to say, listen, we can't open. We had to put up a big sign. You know, thank you so much, but there's
nothing left.
everything. You cleaned us out. and we had to go back and get everything all over again. And so we'll be open on Wednesday. On Wednesday comes, we were ready. You know, we've made so much stuff. We made lots of ravioli, lots of pasta. And we didn't know what would happen. But they came back. The same flock.
It's amazing.
It was like those birds that fly in a group. They all came back, more of them. And they brought their friends. And there was a mob in the street. The line in the street lasted for 2 to 3 months.
Oh my God.
And
From one article.
From one article. It was so powerful. It was so amazing. And we were so exhausted because it was 6 days a week.
Of course.
And we had to work Sundays to catch up because we barely know how to use the pasta machines by that point.
Wow.
And we were still making modifications on them. And the guys from Italy were coming with modified parts because we were unhappy with some of the performance. The machine didn't. Remember, I told you that the machines had to do almost like what your hands could do.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, you know, nobody does this. Well, we do now. Get ready for America. You're going to make it the way I say.
It's amazing.
I don't care what you do in Italy. This is what we're going to do here. And when I showed them the filling, but nobody makes filling like that in a store. You make that for your house. I said, maybe in Italy, maybe in Pennsylvania, maybe in New York, but in Norwalk, this is what we're going to do. And you're going to make it happen. And so we did. So we were still in that process. So we were in a discovery process of how to run this thing. And all of a sudden, it was madhouse.
Amazing.
It was total madhouse. And then we got really tired because, hell, it was brutal. And we were building it for a year. And we took a vacation. And I said to my brother, we went down to the islands. And I said to my brother, listen, why don't we just try one dinner a week? Now, my wife was against this. She didn't want to have a restaurant, per se, because she didn't want her children to be brought up by neglectful parents who were always in a restaurant. But they were only in Wilton, so they could get on a bus and come down here anyway. And I said, we'll do one night a week, just one dinner. You know, just honey.
That's where it all starts.
And we said, okay, $25, all in. Tip, tax,
Wow.
beer, wine, antipasto, pasta, fish or meat, vegetable, dessert. $25. And just tell our customers, you know. And so my sister started taking names. And we could only seat 40 people for the first turn, and we would have 2 turns at 6 o'clock or 8:30. So if 40 people came at 6 and 40 people came at 8:30. We couldn't get rid of the people at 6 o'clock because they were having such a good time. We gave them unlimited amounts of everything.
Wow.
And so if you had the veal cutlet, but you decided to have the salmon, we'd give you the salmon. We'd even come out and say, if you want it, don't worry about it. Just ask for it. You know, don't worry about it. We have it. It's for you. So everything we cooked for that course would be gone. We'd start the next course and we'd do the next one. They were all congregating, waiting to get in, glaring at the other people, you know. And my brother would go out like a master of ceremonies and sort of give them glasses of wine to placate them and keep them shut and tell them jokes. And he's a very funny guy. And they'd all sit down and the same thing would happen. So, oh, this is pretty good, you know.
Now you're open.
Not making any money, but it's pretty good.
Yep.
But it's the greatest come on in the world. If we had planned it that way, but we didn't. We just trying it out. And my brother would say, but do you think you could really cook dinner? I mean, it's more difficult. I said, I know, but we're just going to do one. So then we added Friday. And then I said to my sister, you know, we really have to raise the price. So we made it like $30. And some people, oh, $30. It was better at 25. And then we made it 35. And then we took another break. And I said, look, it's great, but we really just have to go a la carte. We're ready for this.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're not really making any money at 35 because they're eating and drinking everything we can give them.
Of course.
And, you know, bottles of, I mean, it wasn't expensive wine, but it was good wine.
Sure.
They were just guzzling everything, you know, having a good time, and it was wonderful. So we went to a la carte, and that became our pattern. And then we dropped Monday. So we'd have a 2-day weekend, Sunday and Monday. So we'd have a day with the kids and then a day just for our lives. And that went on until 94. And in 94, my wife and I separated, and she went to Montana. And my brother had already gone back to Brooklyn to open up his own place. So at that point, I decided without my wife, I couldn't do lunch and dinner.
Of course. Wow.
And dinner by that point, you know, people were spending $60 a head in 1994 for dinner, and they were drinking expensive wine, and we didn't have a bar, but we had wine, and having a great time. So why do lunch? So that means we had to close the retail counter because the retail counter was part of lunch. And we went to a 4-night a week. It was always my dream to have a four-day week. Like the socialist side of me.
Yep.
So the employees should have a 4-day week. They should have a good life. And so should the boss. So 4-day week.
It's amazing.
And we're on a 4-day week. So from 94 until we left Pasta Nostra in 2015, we did a 4-day week dinner only. No retail. Once in a while we did retail. Like for Christmas, we would let people have retail. Yep. But it was so hard to do because there would be so many orders. Sometimes we couldn't open the restaurant because we were so busy making orders.
Yeah.
But we did that. That ran for what? So 24. Whatever. How many years is that?
A lot.
21 years.
Yeah.
Like that. 4 nights a week.
Wow.
It was great, and we made a good living. The employees made a good living. Marcel was the guy you talked to in the kitchen before.
Yep.
He was there with us at that time. Some of the guys are still here who were there then.
Wow.
One of them was a partner here, just recently left and bought his own restaurant.
Wow.
But he was there from 92. So, yeah, a lot of people stayed around, and it was a good thing.
And then at one point you decided to rebrand, right?
Yeah, because, well, I was in my 60s. I never ever wanted this to be something that was going to take up 30 years of my life.
Of course.
I started it, I was 38. I thought my brother, who ultimately didn't like Connecticut, he didn't like, first of all, he didn't like the way they played softball. He was always on a softball team. And he said, these people in Connecticut, they play lob ball. The ball goes in an arc, or arc ball. Arc ball, that's what he called it.
That's amazing.
And he said, well, we pitch the ball in Brooklyn. This is bullshit. And he missed the Brooklyn accent. He was the only guy here with it. And that was funny. And he really didn't like working with me because I was very demanding. I would always say, listen, it has to be this way. It always has to be this way. And he said, what do you know? What do you know? I said, well, look, we got a full room. I must know something.
Something.
But he was always the little brother arguing. And he had promised me that wasn't going to happen in the new place, because it happened in the supermarket, and that's one of the reasons we did not keep it. Because it was, arguing with me. Like, what do you know? What do you know? So, look, I don't, but it's working. So, don't rock the boat.
Yep.
So he had gone back, and I forget where we were with this.
Moving to the new restaurant.
Yeah, and I was thinking, well, I should just quit. No, because everyone's gone. My sister's gone. My wife is gone. My brother's gone. Liana, who had Liana's Trattoria in Fairfield, she left to open up Liana's Trattoria. So all of the core people that I could really dig into it with were gone, and I thought, well, I could just quit, and I've had enough, and I've also I repainted and remodeled the place how many times in 30-something years. I was tired of doing that, and I was tired of coming into the same place with the same problems, and it's a residential building. People upstairs are always a nuisance. The condo association was a nuisance. They were sort of hated the retail store people, and they're always dumping expenses on us that weren't really ours. And the people upstairs were irresponsible. They would flood the washing machine would overflow, and they would come down to the restaurant, and then they said, well, that's not my fault. Of course it's your fault. Clean it up. So I wanted to have something that was stronger or nothing at all. And I said it to my guys, and Marcel being one of them. I said, look, I'll do something new, but I don't want to do it alone. I want you to have something in it. So Marcel and 2 of the guys came in. And one of the other guys finally cashed out and did
his own.
Has his own place.
Yeah.
And the other guy left the business completely early on, and Marcel's still in it with us. And so this was the dream, to have something different. And we would have a bar, which we have, which we had none in the other place.
Yeah.
And I would get some kind of an opportunity to do things that I did for myself with my friends, but not for my customers.
Yeah.
Because Pasta Nostra was
awesome.
a pasta place. And I also, I think I resented the being treated like a second-class restaurant, because people would come, and one guy walked in one day and the place was empty, and he said, "Oh, I want to get a table." And whoever was running it, maybe it was this guy Lupe, who was trying to get in right now, or maybe it was Jose. Somebody said, "Well, sorry, we have no tables available." And he stood there, he said, "The whole goddamn place is empty. What are you talking about?" And he said, "We're 100% booked.
They're just not here.
We're going to be full in 20 minutes, and as soon as opening hits, and we have no table for you." And the guy just stood there and he said, "It's a goddamn pasta place. What are you talking?" And I didn't want to be a goddamn pasta place. I wanted to be treated like with respect, like this is a restaurant. And if we have no table, we have no table. And so, nice of you to come in. Come see us again. Maybe next time.
Make a reservation.
Make a reservation, So, so I wanted to break that stigma of being a goddamn pasta place. It's like if you have a hot dog stand,
of course,
and you want to cook steaks. I wouldn't have a steak in a hot dog place. I used to hear that a lot.
Yep.
Oh, why don't you have the steak? I wouldn't have steak in a pasta place. Hey, I grew up in the meat business. I was hanging out in the Fort Greene Market when I was this big in 1951, going in with my father, looking at carcasses of beef and veal and lamb. I know this business, but you can't. It's a pasta place, so
right.
you have this. So I wanted to break free. So Brucolino seemed like we talked about the origin of the word Brucolino.
Brooklyn dude.
Brucolino, a guy from Brooklyn, right? Brucolino seemed like a good, because I wanted to cook a lot of stuff I saw in Brooklyn that wasn't even necessarily Italian. There were Jews, there were Lebanese, Syrians, there were Mexicans, there were Chinese. So there's a lot of influences in the experience of a young guy growing up in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been the same if you were growing up in Rome or Sicily or Genoa or Venice. Yep. So I wanted to incorporate, because I was incorporating those things into my cooking, but I didn't feel comfortable in Pasta Nostra to do that stuff, and I wanted that freedom. I also wanted to present a formal Italian meal, which is antipasto, pasta, and protein in a 3-course setting with a vegetable. And hopefully even a dessert, if you could get to the 4th course. I wanted to be able to do that once in my life, to make a real Italian meal out of it, instead of sort of Italian-American, macaroni meal, which was great, and nothing wrong with it, and I love it. But I wanted that freedom. And so that was, Brucolino gave me that. Brucolino gave me that, but when I opened Brucolino, I was 68. When I opened Pasta Nostra, I was 38. Nothing I cared in the lamb white days, as Dylan Thomas says. And nothing I realized in the lamb white days that, time held me green and dying.
Yep.
I was getting older, and I was running out of energy. I built this place. I was hanging from the ceiling, working up there and cutting holes in the brick wall outside.
That's incredible.
But there came a point where I started to get tired, and the resistance to Brucolino didn't help, because it made me feel bad that so many people felt, oh, it's so different, it's so different. It was the same guy cooking the same food, and you could embellish it with many other dishes if you wanted to. But if you really just wanted to have your macaroni, we had it. It was an option. Yeah. But it was somehow the whole thing, oh, and it's so big, and it's so modern. It's not homey and cozy. The other place was so small and loud that I'd go home with no voice at the end of the night.
Wow.
It was a raucous kind of place. And yes, that was fun and charming, but it's also, it takes its toll on the people who do it every day.
Yeah.
It's like driving a car with no springs.
Yep.
You might think it's fun, but the guy in the driver's seat is going to have hemorrhoids or something in a very short time, because you can't do that to yourself.
Yeah.
So I did my Brucolino, and it had its difficulties, but I think we hit our stride. We said, okay, no more a la carte, no more of this. You come in, you pay $75, you have this dinner. And there were supplements too. And it was 3 courses, and then dessert could be optional as an extra course. And if you wanted to have something fancy, there was like $10 extra for this or $5 for that. But mostly you could do a beautiful meal for $75. And it worked. And it finally was kind of rolling.
Yep.
And we just, sorry, we don't do that anymore. This is what we do. This is what we need to do. We need to have $125 check average. You have to pay $75 plus the wine, plus the drinks, plus maybe the dessert. We have to have this level because this is the amount of money it takes to keep this kind of thing going. We didn't realize it because it crept up on us over the years. We didn't realize how, we were doing that $65 dinner in Pasta Nostra, how that $65 dinner had become $130 in today's money.
Yep.
It just caught us unawares because everyone is trying to keep the price down, and the corporate restaurant chains are coming in with ridiculously low prices. They could sell a steak for $29. Okay, it's not the same steak. It might not even come from a cow. God knows, or maybe it didn't even come from Earth. God knows where they get this stuff. And actually they're doing it in a test tube now. So soon they won't come from a cow.
No.
It'll come from some slop on a Patriot dish.
It's wild.
I grit my teeth. I don't want to be around for like next century's dinner. Please don't invite me. I'm out. We were always, in the restaurant business, you're always working, you're always in the business, you're always thinking. And I don't think the entire industry took note of what was happening. Maybe a few smart guys like Danny Meyer did, and he was already moving on to Gramercy Tavern, and it's $1.50. You don't come in the door without that. That's what you pay, But most of us, and those are in big metro areas where you could sort of do that.
Get away with it, yeah.
But most of us didn't think about it. But if you saw the articles that came out in the Times, for instance, opinion articles and stuff from restaurateurs who were going out of business after COVID. They all sat up and took note, like, oh my God, we've been giving away the store. So even if one woman said, I forget, Prune, I think the owner of Prune, she wrote in the Times, she said, even if I can reopen the place, even if I get government money or something, some miracle happens or COVID goes away and I'm able to scrape it together and reopen, she said, I don't think I should reopen it because I don't think I should have the same place I had before because we weren't paying people enough. The benefits were going down. The salaries have not gone up. We're scrimping and, we're trying to make everything work. We've got broken equipment that we barely can keep running because we can't afford new stuff. She said, what would be the point? And it hit everybody then. But it was hitting me when I was facing the Brooklino numbers crunch. Yeah. And it was better to do 50 people, 70 people at $125, all in. Of course. Than to have a lot of people coming in here and we're struggling to take care of them and we're not making money. So that was a good model. But COVID was now running against us, and that took the steam out of everything. Yeah. So we survived on COVID by converting it because I had retail background. Before they said that we had to close, I sat here with my son and I said, this is going to be one of the greatest disasters of our time. No earthquake or anything can do what this is going to do because it's going to shut. Nobody knows how the merry-go-round started. The merry-go-round started way back, maybe before the Enlightenment, in the Renaissance perhaps, and it built speed and it built speed and it built speed. And now we've got this amazing international economy, and nobody knows what makes it run. And if you stop it, nobody knows where the start switch is. Yep. And that was 2 or 3 days before they shut down Connecticut. Yeah, crazy. But I was already buying packaging goods and stuff to do a to-go business because I had that background in me and I knew what to do. Yeah. And so we were ready to roll out the day we were shut. Amazing. So we never missed a day. But as you can see, it's never going to come back. No. What we did to this thing, whatever comes out of it, may be something else, it may be something better, it may be something worse. But we rolled the dice without realizing we were rolling the dice. And I think it was a foolish thing to do. Also, psychologically, I don't know how people weathered it. I didn't do it because I was here every day. My guys were here every day. Of course. But people who stayed at home, we would see them huddled in their cars. We would have to bring packages out to them, and they're outdoors, right in the breeze, and they would say, in their cell phones,
leave it right there.
Put the package on the ground and go back inside. It's like, what the hell are we doing? A drug deal here?
The drug was
This is a macaroni, dude. And or put it on the trunk, and then as soon as we come in, they press the button, run out, grab it, put it in the trunk, and take off.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So put yourself in their shoes. Those people were suffering, and they're still suffering. A lot of them. they've damaged their psycho-spiritual balance. They put themselves in a place that nobody should live in, like the people living in the cave in is it Socrates' story about the allegory in the cave? They didn't know what the world was. Well, these people went into the cave, and they're like people in the Matrix who went into the next Matrix.
They never came out.
Well, how are they going to get out of the second one to even get into the first one to get out of that one? You know, no one can live long enough to do that. Yeah. And so they're hurt, and it's sad, but that affects the entire. Everybody affects the economy because all of us drove the economy. We were all pushing the merry-go-round.
Yep.
And when some of us got off and don't get back on, the merry-go-round just doesn't, you know, it does kind of a little slow. There's moments when it stops, you know, the horses don't go up and down. The music sounds funny, and that's kind of where we're in now. Yep. And it's tough. It's a tough time. It's a tough time, and I don't know where we'll go. But so I gave up the whole $75 thing, and we went into food to go, and now we've come back, but having weathered all these storms, I said, I'm too tired, man. I can't just do this. I just can't do this anymore. And there's a guy in Westport, I think you know this guy, Double L Market, Lloyd.
Shout out to Lloyd.
Lloyd, yes.
The plug.
And Lloyd had never been in here, in my new place. And he came in one day with his beautiful lady, Jana. I think they sat right here, or maybe there. And they were eating, and he said to me, he said, Joe, he said, he got up. He said, I owe you an apology. He said, I should have been here. I should have seen this. I should have seen what you did, and I never came to the new thing. He said, this is amazing. And he was very moved, and it was moving to me. And he said, I want to bring my people here. I want them to see what you're doing. I want to see the quality you're doing. I want to see what's driving this and how you're doing it and how you're maintaining it, because this is remarkable. And sometime later, he asked me about the salad dressing that we make called Pasta Nostra salad sauce. And he said, you know, we could put that in the store in our Double L Market. I said, well, what, really? So it has. So I had never printed a label. Can I get it? Can I show you?
Of course, of course.
And I had never printed a label. Lloyd asked me for a box of these. This is $30 a bottle. It's my favorite salad dressing. We've been making it for. There used to be a vinegar that we got from a company that is now defunct, way back in the 90s, and when they went belly up, they imported a balsamic vinegar that was very much like this, and we couldn't get a replacement for it. We tried. Everyone would say, "Oh, we got Henry's vinegar." His guy's name was Henry. We got Henry's, but nobody had it. So one day I started just concocting, blending vinegars to get the flavor, and I created this, and we've been making it ever since. But we never had a label for it. So Lloyd said he wanted to put it in the store. So I actually had the label printed. This little fork logo, I don't know if can you see that? The little fork and spaghetti was drawn by my wife, who was not an artist, but I made her do it because I said, I don't have time to do it, just do it. I don't care what it looks like, just do it. And she did it, and it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
And that was like 1986 or something, because we needed something to put on like the menus and stuff. So that was how we got that. So one day I said to Lloyd, well, how's the salad sauce doing? And he said, what do you mean? Could you give us 2 cases? I said, 2 cases? What'd you do with the first case? He said, just give us, so I gave him 2 more cases. I went over to see him after a few weeks, and he said, can you give us 2 more?
That's amazing.
I said, wait a minute, Lloyd, it's $30 a bottle. I put it on my counter. I hardly sell any. What are you doing with them all?
He's got a loyal fan base over there.
I said, are you telling everybody, look, Joe Bruno's? He said, Joe, I put it on the counter, and people see, what? Pasta Nostra? That still exists? They're still around? Give me a bottle.
Love it.
So that sparked the idea. If Pasta Nostra, he said, Pasta Nostra, you don't know it, but Pasta Nostra is still a brand. People know it, people like it. Then we started to talk about it. And that's when we said, well, if Pasta Nostra is a brand, maybe we could, have products, sell them to Lloyd, maybe sell them here, maybe sell them somewhere else, and go back to the original Pasta Nostra menu, which they can do without me, for the most part. Whereas the Briccolino menu was intense. It was and constantly creative. I was always inventing new stuff. I was in the kitchen 8 hours a day.
Yep.
Then I'm running a business for 4 hours a day. Then I'm in the dining room for 4 hours a day, and I'm approaching 75. What the hell is gonna I won't be able to do this.
Yeah.
I physically can't sustain. So that's when we a year ago put the banner over Pasta Nostra over the original Briccolino sign, which broke my heart because the sign is beautiful. And that's how we got to Pasta Nostra.
Love it.
And now people come back and say, "Oh, I'm so glad you changed the name." And there's a little bit of wistful.
Of course.
There's a little bit of angst there because I didn't really want to, but I didn't know I was going to get old. Nobody told me that time would take me up to the Swallow Throne Loft, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
And it does. It takes you away.
So something that
There it is.
I feel like every restaurant owner that we talk to in Fairfield County has some sort of connection to Martha Stewart. So when you and I were talking, you mentioned how Martha shot a episode with you.
In the restaurant.
Yeah.
I did more than one episode with her, but we did one in the restaurant.
So do you mind just telling the viewers about that experience working with Martha?
Well, that was, I would say, when was that? Shortly before she got in trouble. I don't remember, 2000 maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
But by that time, I was disenchanted with the whole press thing. I had gotten 3 stars from the New York Times by then. I'd gotten national edition of the New York Times. It was a half-a-page picture of me holding up pasta. So I was really like famous now. And but I was uncomfortable with the whole thing. And I began to, the more I read reviews, the more I realized that the reviews weren't honest. And so one day I just took a review and I sent it back to Patricia Brooks, who lived in New Canaan, the New York Times critic. And I said, "Look, Patricia, thank you very much. Comparing me to Mies van der Rohe and all the things you've done and putting me in the national edition. And it was all great. But I really don't want to be in the New York Times anymore. I don't like what's happening. I don't like what I see. I don't like what I read. I don't think the critical process is critical. I think it's designed to sell papers. And that's not what it should be, because if you don't say the truth about what's going on, you make it worse. If you say that this guy who's using factory-made food in his restaurant deserves a star, then other guys use factory-made food. You're just making it worse. So I don't want to be in it. Thank you. So she took umbrage. She, at the end of her life, she actually went public and criticized. The worst experience of her life was the guy who gave back his stars. She never mentioned me.
That's so funny.
But I was that guy. She didn't say, I was also the guy who said he didn't want to be in the Times to begin with. Maybe she was too old and she'd forgotten that. You brought that up before? Well, maybe she'd forgotten, or maybe she didn't care to mention that part. But, so I didn't want to be in anything. So I didn't let anybody interview me. I told all the local papers to leave me out, and there were some arguments about it, but I wouldn't do it. So I'm out. And then Martha said she wanted to do something. She said, "Why don't we? All these years I've been eating here. Why haven't you been on the show?" And I said, "Well, Martha, I'm a little nervous about all that stuff. I don't want your people coming in and painting glazes on my dishes and making them look pretty, and and I don't want to wear makeup, and She said, none of that. She said, everything will be the way you do it."
Wow.
Okay. So months went by, and it was put in the schedule. And I did, I think the first thing I did was something we did on air in our studio, I think, like a segment, like I say, 8 minutes or 9 minutes, whatever it is. And then she said, "Well, why don't we do something, that's more like," I think the second time was the big one, but they actually came up to the restaurant on a day we were closed, and they occupied the restaurant for a whole day. And I was really nervous about all that because they had a bigger crew than I had.
Yeah.
They had more guns.
Yeah.
And they were amazing. They were the consummate professionals. They were not bossy. They were not arrogant. They were not we're the press. All that kind of shit that you get from people. We know what we're doing. Step aside. You're just a talent,
right?
Kind of thing. They were wonderful, and in fact, Martha had written a script, and in the script, she gets out of her car, you know, whatever kind of fancy car it was, and they pan her, and she comes into the restaurant, and she joins me in the front where I had my pasta machines. I don't know if you know, I had the machines in the window in those days. And she's going to make pasta with me. And the director tells me what's going on, and you can't do that. He said, why? I said, she's going to get out of a car. She's going to come into the restaurant. She's going to touch food. I said, oh, no. He said, say no more. Let me take care of this.
It's amazing.
So she gets out of the car. They go out and they talk to her. She's in the kitchen. She's washing her hands. It starts when she's coming out of the kitchen, drying her hands. And I'm at the front, and that's where the episode begins. And she says, look, my hands are clean. She's wearing an apron.
That's amazing.
Look, my hands are clean. And I said, let me be sure.
I
She
love
was
that.
like this, like a little kid. And it was great. It starts to show off. Everyone laughs. The audience must have laughed from here to California because it's funny. And I had sort of put Martha on the spot. And people, you know, didn't think you could do that with Martha, but you could. She was game as long as you weren't afraid. And so I got a good laugh in the beginning. The show was meticulously filmed. We filmed making pasta. They came back later with a smaller crew, and they walked through the dining room.
Wow.
And they did live shots of people who said it was okay. They did a shot of Martha at a table. They came in the kitchen. They held a handheld camera right over the pots, and the guys were plating, and the steam is coming out, and they're passing and they're following the plates to the table. We had 3 segments, half the show.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we did the last one was back at the studio where we cooked together something else, and that was all part of this Pasta Nostra event.
Yeah.
It was, you know, I don't think that Coppola could have done a better job filming it. It was absolutely beautiful. The food shots were gorgeous. You know, the wife, the thief, the cook, and her lover, they didn't do better. They did more dramatic food shots, but they didn't do better food. The food was beautiful, shining, steaming, glistening, and there was no makeup on anything.
That's all that matters.
Not even the chef. Yeah.
So you also mentioned she cut herself, right, while doing the segment?
It was one of the segments I stabbed her. She didn't cut herself. You want me to tell that story?
Yeah.
With all the expletives?
Yeah, go for it.
She was standing next to me. It was in the studio shot. And I was cutting or chopping. And for some reason, she should have known better, but she reached across something she wanted to get. And we were filming. This is going to be, it's not live, but we're filming. And she reached across just as I moved the knife forward. And the point of the blade poked her right here.
Oh.
And I didn't know how bad at first, but I just went, oh, fuck! And then I look up at the crew, which is in the dark, and I say, cut! Martha! And I put the knife down. Martha, how are you? She says, oh, no, it's not. It was just a little pinhole, thank God. So she had a first aid kit. We went back there, fixed her up, and she came back, and she said, oh, I'm fine, look, you know. And we carried on. But she was, you could play with Martha. But if you were intimidated by Martha, with too many people were, then everybody, like the short guy who made the famous cookies, was he a comedian or something?
Yeah.
And she kind of stood in front of him all the time, and he felt like he couldn't get out in front of her. I think that's because he couldn't play with her. She was game. Yep. She was fine, and unbelievably professional.
I love it.
Everything was done exceedingly well. The studio prep, every ingredient was in its place. Everything I said had to be there was there. You know, they were amazingly good with their talent, and that's why the show looked good.
Yeah.
And it was a shame. And then I actually had an idea to do something with her in Aspen, to start up a cooking school. And we talked about it, and then the disaster hit with the insider trading and so on, and that was all over.
Yep. One question we ask all of our entrepreneurs is, if you could have a billboard anywhere in the United States, it could say anything on it, what would you pick and why?
Where would I put it, or what would I say?
Yeah, where would you put it and what would it say?
Oh, geez, damn. I don't really like billboards to begin with.
Okay.
So it'd have to be a damn good one. Well, you know, I mean, if it was to my advantage, it would have to be right off 95.
There we go.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, if I was going to get into that game,
Why not?
I'd put it right off 95, and it would say, "Eat like you're in Brooklyn with an arrow. Exit 15."
I love it. If someone wants to reach out to make a reservation here, what's the best way for them to?
Other than being here and asking for one?
Yeah.
Phone. I don't like reservation services.
Okay.
You can see restaurants are backing away now. They're saying things like, all of our tables are available, because everyone knows that when you got Resi and one of these things, that some tables are being withheld, right?
Yeah.
For the good customers, for whatever. Usually the good customers, right?
That's awesome.
So restaurants are now saying, all of our tables are now available, because they're trying to let you know that they're not gaming you like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to game people. We don't game people. You know, when who's the comedian who I don't like? He had a late night talk show, but he was always very dry, blonde, toe-headed guy, tall. He lived in Connecticut. I don't know if he still does.
Conan?
No, before Conan. Anyway, he was famous, and he wanted to come, and we didn't take reservations in those days. And we didn't take reservations until '94, I think. It was cash only, no reservations. And his secretary calls up, and my sister ran the place, the dining room, and she's, no reservations. And what do you mean? But he's, and she mentioned the name. Look, we don't do reservations. We don't do reservations. Not even the Pope. And the woman was very indignant. And I said, look, just tell her. I said, just tell her. He could stand in line and do a monologue, have a great time, and have a real audience instead of a fake audience. And the time will go by in no time, and before you know it, he'll be sitting down. But needless to say, he never came. But I feel that way. Not even the Pope. There are no exceptions. Everyone's a good customer, whether they've been there once or they've been there 50 times. And everybody deserves to be treated fairly. And I'm very strict about that. And people think I can be a prick about it, but that's the only way to be.
That's the way it is.
Everyone gets fair. Everyone is treated right. There are no special people. Everyone's special.
Love it.
And that's the way we do our reservations. So pick up the phone, say hi to Lupe or me, and book your table.
Love it. That wraps up episode 21 with Joe. Pasta Nostra, 20 South Main Street in South Norwalk, Connecticut. Come over, show some love, and thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your.
I cut my head like I was. Oh, that was exhausting.
No, you did an amazing job.
Camera, but wow, like, yeah, I didn't think we were going to go that long.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure talking to you.
It was going to be so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Even your cameraman laughed a few times.
Yeah. So, Joe, where's this coming from?
These are American red snapper. So these are Florida. Is where American red snapper live.
And you were saying this is basically the last truckload that came out before the hurricane hit?
Yeah, he held the truck for as long as he could to get everything he could onto the truck.
Wow.
Before the storm hit.
Wow.
So this truck hit New York last night.
Wow.
Sometime in the wee hours, and then it was offloaded and then picked up by our guy from Greenwich in the wee hours of the morning and filleted in Greenwich and brought over here. But there are many species of red snapper. I didn't even know this, but the predominant species in Florida is American red. There's another one that's very rare, but supposed to be even better. But I mean, these are hard to find.
Yeah.
And these are limited. The catch is limited.
Is it from Key West?
I think they come up and down the coast. I really don't know where the actual fishery is.
Yeah, I went fishing in Key West and we caught some snapper.
Look at the color of the meat.
Looks amazing.
Because the blood is in it. It's red. It's really gorgeous stuff. These are going to be awesome. They're big too. See the size of them?
And then based upon what comes in, you decide what kind of dish to make.
Yeah, well, we knew what we're going to do with these if they came.
Yep.
But then maybe they don't come.
Right.
No, we don't. No, we can't do them.
Do you know what kind of dish you're going to make with the snapper?
Yeah, we're going to quickly pan fry them with a little flour on them. And we're going to douse them in a pickled pepper sauce that's a little spicy.
Amazing.
So it's like Italian, in agrodolce in Italian, but it means in sweet and sour.
Wow.
So agrodolce, sweet and sour, sweet and tart.
Awesome.
And great. Fish do really well with it. Pork does well with it too. I'm gonna wash my hands. Are we done looking at fish? Yep. We got the clams?
We got the clams too.
Where are they?
Frozen.
Oh. You want to look at clams from...
of course.
Clams from...
And where did these sardines come from?
They came from Greece.
Wow.
It's crazy.
But they're untreated sardines.
Wow.
Because if the fancy ones with the chemical treatments come placed out in beautiful boxes and they're bigger, but they have chemicals on them.
Right. Who wants that?
And yeah, this is the whole struggle for us here is to get stuff that's not been messed with. And by the way, can we curse on this thing?
You can curse as much as you
Oh,
want.
okay, good.
Go nuts.
Curse as much as you want.
Cursing honestly brings more viewers.
Yeah, it's better.
I can say fuck. Okay, good. So we've been getting these clams from this guy's father for 36 years, 37 years. And you see the dark mineral shell, it's very gray. And inside they're very pink. And they're sandy bed clams, so there's no mud in them. So when you open them, unlike the clam, I hate to say it, but the clams in Connecticut or Rhode Island, you open it, there's a blob of mud in them because they're growing in mud. But these are growing in sandy beds. We've been getting them from this guy here. His father retired, and lately the kid's been disappointing us a little bit. Sometimes he can't meet the demand, and he gets clams from other guys around him.
And you can tell.
Oh, right away. I'll call him and say, these aren't the same clams.
Right.
Well, you're okay, but I couldn't do this. If you can't do it, just don't do it.
Tell us.
Don't give me something that I don't want, because I'm only gonna ask my money back.
And you're known as someone who pays attention to detail in your restaurant, and your customers are coming, right? They know that the expectation is going to be like high quality.
I spent my childhood in East Quogue, so we had a house right on Shinnecock Bay.
Yep.
Shinnecock Bay is loaded with clams. We just went down and got them every day. They were like, it's like our storeroom for clams.
Amazing.
And they were like, they're very much like this clam. And I used to go out to Shinnecock, but my parents still lived there, and I was here, and get them and bring back a bag or two. But my parents are gone, and I stopped going out there.
Yeah.
But this guy's clams, equal quality.
Well,
If he
stays it.
yeah, but the old man's gone, and I feel that's gonna impact him, because like we're talking about with business, everyone's tempted to
Cut corners.
cut a corner, you know.
Save some money.
You gotta stay in business.
They're
You gotta
getting
pay
pinched.
for the boat. You
Of
gotta
course.
pay the guys, and it's this. We're up against this everywhere in the food industry in particular.
Yeah.
Because look, we're up against stuff that in a few days these are no good.
Of course.
What are you gonna do then?
Nothing. It becomes
And,
waste.
and what about when it rains and you can't go out? And then there's more and more of this situation where people can't go out because the local authorities, it rains too much,
Yep.
and sewer systems can't process, and the lawns are full of all these chemicals, and so now all the water is, the beds get contaminated,
Yep.
and then they have to wait for that to clear before they can let them take clams. That didn't used to be the case.
Right.
It didn't used to be that contaminated.
No.
Oh, maybe they would say, well, we just didn't monitor it enough. You know, I don't know what's true, but I've been eating those clams since I'm that big.
Sure.
You know, and the water was clean. We lived across the street from Dr. Ross Negrelli. He was the director of the Coney Island Aquarium when he was alive. And he taught us all about the pollution in the bay and the cycle of life for all these creatures.
Oh, that's amazing.
And there was nothing bad in Shinnecock Bay when I was a kid. Because there were no bulkheads,
Right.
there were no lawns, everyone lived on the beach with natural land going down to the water. Once you put the bulkheads in, and you put the lawns in, and then you put a lot of houses with a lot of septic systems, all of that,
Yeah.
bulkhead material, which is full
Didn't
of
even think
chemicals.
about that, yeah.
That's all that wood is saturated with chemicals,
Yeah.
right? And then the lawns with all their chemicals and their pesticides and their herbicides, because everyone wants to have a beautiful lawn.
Yep.
You know, we're talking about the Hamptons, you know. But in those days, it wasn't the Hamptons, in quotes. It was just a place,
Yeah,
an
of
old
course.
money place. The people from New York started to come out, trickle out, and have a little bungalow, which is what we had. But then everyone started building mansions, and you know,
Yeah.
they had to wear Gucci bags and to the beach with fur coats, and everything got fancy. You know?
Yep.
And then the pollution goes up. Anyway, I got to put this down. I got to clean my hand.
Okay.
Can I give you that?
Yeah.
I want.
And while he's cleaning his hands, let's just go back to the sardines. So, something interesting. Tell me, Roger, if you can hear me. Something interesting Joe said was that they've been waiting 2 years for these sardines to come in. Basically, since the pandemic destroyed distribution and made the supply chain completely messed up, they basically have been waiting 2 years for these sardines to come, and they came in from Greece. Mind if I just open this up to show?
Go ahead.
So these are, you were saying the big difference between these sardines and other types of sardines is there's no sort of chemicals on top of them. These are just fresh sardines.
Untreated sardines.
Untreated.
Right.
Looks amazing.
The chemical ones look absolutely like they look showroom perfect,
Yeah.
like they were made out of plastic or
Right,
something.
yeah.
You can pick them up and say, how could they be so perfect? The chemistry, whatever they do to them, it makes them firm and rigid.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they just look strange.
So how does how do you create a relationship with someone in Greece to even get these?
Well, because we have a guy in Greenwich that we've been dealing with. The original guy is now deceased, but he sold it to another guy and he trained him, and he's just, I'd say he's pretty much the same deal, cut from the same cloth.
So he's basically going out creating these relationships.
He was in the market this morning.
Wow.
Right, and he's talking to people who do this kind of stuff.
In South Street Market?
What is it? The Fulton Street Fish Market.
Yeah.
But it's no longer on Fulton Street.
Right.
It's now in the Bronx.
It's at Hunts Point, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
But yeah, so those relationships go back even before this guy, back to
incredible.
the guy I had. And the guy I had, it was called Bonton Fish Market, and it was on Greenwich Avenue. In those days, when I came to Connecticut, I saw this fish market. I said, "Oh, this is a beautiful fish market. This is like an old Italian fish market, or a Chinese fish market in the city." And then the guy came in one day and he started eating lunch, and he didn't stop. I mean, he ate like 3 main courses.
Wow.
And he said, "This is the best food I've ever had." And he said, "Do you know me?" I said, "No, who are you?" And he told me, I said, "Oh my God,
That's incredible.
You got the Cadillac market in Connecticut. You got the best market. This is beautiful." And he said, "Well, I should sell you fish." And I said, "Well, I don't want to serve fish." And he said, "Why not?" I said, because it's always going to be, one day it'll be good and one day it'll be crap.
Gotta sell
and
fast.
I can't deal with that.
Yeah,
I grew
it's a
up
lot
in the
of pressure.
Hamptons. I took my own fish out of the water. I took my own crabs. I took my own. I don't want it. And he said, if that ever happened, I would personally be here and I would remove anything and I would replace it. But he said, but I personally buy everything. That's why my market is the way it is. And we became friends. And it was that way. I never got anything I didn't love. And he always tell me, I think we're going to get this. He'll get calls from captains.
Wow.
We're bringing in a certain level of tuna or a certain level of swordfish from Maryland or from Montauk or from Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, whatever we're bringing in, a certain kind of catch. And, this is the kind of stuff that you want. And he would buy it on the boat before it even docked.
That's amazing.
He would be buying it by radio. And this young guy does the same thing.
Wow.
So this kid, Tony, who took it over.
It's awesome. And one thing that's very noticeable about your kitchen, I know you guys got to wrap this up so it stays fresh, is just how pristine this kitchen is, right?
This is the same kitchen that we had at the original Pasta Nostra.
Wow.
And so the well-known architect in Westport, Roger Ferris, designed this restaurant. He's a customer, and he loved what I did, and this is the only way I could afford a guy like him.
Yep.
Because he did it as a friend, very kind of him to help me out and make it affordable for me. And when we looked at this place, we were gutting it because it was 3 different stores.
Wow.
And we had the master, floor plan, and he kept talking about the kitchen with his team and everything, and I just walked in and I had my original vellum from the original kitchen.
Yep.
And I put my original vellum on top of the floor plan, and I slid it into the spot, and I said, "This is the kitchen."
Wow.
The rest of it is yours.
Yep. It's amazing.
Because I knew they didn't know how to build a kitchen. And this is the kitchen we had, and we liked it.
Yep.
And this is the kitchen we have now. And Marcelo's been in this kitchen and the other kitchen for 24 years?
22.
Yeah, do you mind just talking about?
Sure. I mean,
Yeah, it's on. You don't, you just hold it up.
Well, I came in August 2000, so
Wow.
I came as a busboy, cleaning tables.
Amazing.
I don't know anything about restaurants, and then
Joe taught you it all?
I asked Chef Joe if he can let me work in the kitchen for 3 hours, and he said yes. So I started working for 5 hours, then I moved to the floor, and then that's the way I keep watching everybody else, how they were cooking and doing this stuff, and I learned.
And one thing, obviously, I think you can attest to when I was doing my research on Joe Chef Joe, is that he's the most loyal person there is, right?
Yes.
When he takes you in, he not only does he teach you everything there is to know about running a successful restaurant, but
Right.
he's loyal, right?
He's very loyal, and I understand sometimes when I'm doing something wrong, he comes over, he lets me know that it's wrong. Why should I get upset or mad?
Of course.
I'm wrong. I had to fix it up. I had to do it.
And I think a lot of businesses lack that right nowadays, right? They're afraid of getting in trouble or having to deal with HR, but obviously you can attest to the fact that you learning the right way to do it is the best way to learn from your mistakes.
Instead of getting mad, just fix it up.
Yep.
Learn from that mistake and keep going. That's
amazing.
That's what I do, and that's what I've been learning here.
And how long does it take to prepare for, for dinner tonight? How long does it take? How many hours?
Well, mostly all the times we start at noon.
Wow.
At noon.
And you guys open at 4?
4 or 5.
It's incredible.
Yes. So we have to start doing whatever we had to do. Marinara, meat sauce from starch.
Amazing.
Yesterday we started at 10 in the morning.
10 o'clock in the morning.
So on Wednesdays we start at 10 in the morning because we have a large mass of product to move and get ready for the week. Right, and then the other days are he can call the shots and decide if they should be at noon, if they should come at 1, if they should come at 11, depending on what else they have to do. But they also maintain the kitchen. They clean the hood themselves.
So do you do that at the end of the night, every single night? Like, obviously this is like
every night we had to leave this.
You could eat off this floor. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But they clean the hood, like they go up and take everything apart once a week.
Once a week.
They stand up here and they take all these things down.
All the ovens.
So that we don't have a company come in and touch it. We don't want anybody to touch it. So once or twice a year, we're legally required to have a company come in, and they come in and they touch it. But then we have to clean up because they touched everything.
Right. Amazing.
We got to get these in.
Yeah,
I don't want to touch them again, eh?
Okay, let's walk over here so they can keep
So you
walking.
saw some fish. That's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.